My name is Tiffany, and in this video, I am going to show you a very cool tool that is available for the nonprofit community in King County, Washington. It is the 501 Compensation Tracker. Side note, King County goes all the way from the Seattle metropolitan area all the way up into deep into the Cascade Mountains. So first off, I'm going to do a quick overview of the 501 Compensation Tool Tracker itself, and then dive in a little bit to the two accompanying reports that were released alongside the tracker. The first one, Putting People First, the King County Nonprofit Wage and Benefit Report that was produced in 2021, and the second one being the King County Nonprofit Employee Engagement Survey Report. A lot of reports on the surveying, but that's why this is interesting. So let's just dive in. First of all, raise your hand if you've ever Googled how much should position at my nonprofit make. Anyway, for the nonprofit sector, specific job data has not always been very easy to come by. Then the county worked with a group called 501 Commons. They're like a resource and training center for community nonprofits in that area, like really capacity building, super cool organization. They also facilitate the Give Big, a big donation day in the area every year. So yeah, they're a very cool organization. Obviously, a ton of links to check out more of what they do in the description. 501 Commons and King County together surveyed 233 nonprofits. They gathered the data between March and July of 2021, and they received data on more than 10,000 salaries in the area. And along with these two published reports that they put out, they also developed an easily searchable tool, which I will show you right now. So it is called the Putting People First resource. So I'm gonna go to resources and go down to Putting People First. You pop that up. Down here, we've got the two reports, report, and then here is our 501 Compensation Tracker. So we're gonna put the 501 Compensation Tracker, and we've got a little bit more information about how to use it, but we're just gonna scroll down and dive in. As you can see, it is a pretty straightforward drop-down menu. Let's find a couple of examples to use. Let's see. Oh, don't we love community organizer? That like pretty broad category. I mean, Obama was a community organizer. What does it mean? But what they do is they have a handy kind of summary of the job description, so you can kind of see if it checks out with what your idea of what a community organizer position is. So as you can see, you show that 10 organizations responded with information about that, so that's handy to see how many folks were pooled. You can see what the average salary is versus the, whether you're striking closer to the 90th or the 10th percentile. So 10 orgs, 22 salaries, but unfortunately insufficient responses to fill out these additional categories. So you can't really tell if a community organizer at a large organization and a small organization are getting paid drastically differently. Another thing that's kind of cool is that you can compare, let's say, community educator. So you're considering whether you want to be a community educator or community organizer. Well, okay, so they get paid about the same. However, they did get a few more responses from this one, and so you can see, for an example, how it would look if you had the data on for the community educator to give you more of a breakdown of, if you're at an organization that has a budget of more than $10 million, $55K is the average, whereas if you're at an organization that is between $500,000 and $1 million, then you are going to have an average of $48,000. So really straightforward, and it's so cool how you can compare jobs. Let's pick one that we know there's going to be a bunch of. Oh, okay. Executive Director, CEO. There we go. All right. So we've got for the Executive Director position, wow, 219 salaries that they're pulling from. So they've got a lot of data on this. This will give a good example. So if you are at an organization that's making more than 10 million, your average is 212,000 a year for executive director or CEO. If you're looking at an organization that is less than 500,000, 73,000 is the average. So that gives you a much better idea of a range. So if you're a board of directors looking to set salary for your chief, your CEO, your ED, then this will give you a really good comparison of apples to apples based on the size of your organization's budget and field of service. That's the other thing they break it down by. So that's really handy to know. Yeah, so anyway, that's a quick intro to using the tool. If you want to just look at one without the comparisons, you just clear them out like that. Super, super simple and easy to use. I think it's a great tool, and I think they went the extra mile in making it a very simple user experience, which I really appreciate. Before I get into the reports themselves, there are some videos that were put out by 501 Commons in the immediate release of these reports, and so you can check them out. They are, fair warning, both of them are about an hour long. I will link those videos in the description. Okay, people, so the survey is quite long. It is quite long to read the entire, not the survey, the report. The report is quite long, but that's good. It's thorough, long and thorough. Obviously, you can skim it and just pull out the data that is relevant to you and that is useful to your organization, and it is cool to have it all in one place. One of the coolest things I think about this report is that they did not shy away from making recommendations of how nonprofits, both as individual organizations and also as members of the nonprofit community, can implement and make change. So for example, they look at the standards of not just a minimum wage, but they're looking at a living wage, the wages you need to live. And they're looking at that against the reported jobs from nonprofits, and specifically pointed out jobs that reported by nonprofits to fall below that living wage line for King County. Made a urgent recommendation that those positions in particular, they made a specific call to action to increase those salaries above a living wage as soon as possible, quite urgently. And so I really appreciated that. Another call out that I found really interesting was that pretty across the board, nonprofits do not pay a premium for bilingual staff. Interesting. It's just like considered something that is just like a bonus. It's like a buy one, get one for your employees. I think they also do that with graphic design skills. It's just like considered like not something you compensate for, but just like extra. Anyway, so I feel that for someone who is just like job hunting and wants to know where compensation currently sits for specific positions, the compensation tool is perfectly sufficient. You do not need the report. This report is really going to be useful for thought leaders in the nonprofit community. It's for board members and executive directors. It's just really fun to look through the report because I think it can also give you ideas for ways that you can structure your benefits differently. It can really shape your understanding of what wages and benefits can look like, I guess, on the full spectrum. Obviously, when you're putting together a wage and benefit package for your staff or for your organization, you're not just like picking off of a menu. There are resource constraints, but it's still just handy to have all that information in one report. But for things like benchmarking yourself and knowing what's possible for creating that long-term compensation package that reflects your philosophy and vision as an organization, then this tool is just, this report is just really invaluable for having all of that information in one place. It's really handy. Okay, finally, let the employees speak. The Nonprofit Employee Engagement Survey. Now, this one was interesting. I found the results not surprising. For the most part, nonprofit employees are very happy in their jobs and their sense of meaning in their work. Obviously, that's a huge reason why people choose to go into nonprofit work. And they also want to be able to earn a living wage. So none of this surprising. They want to be paid, compensated better, but also are generally very satisfied in the work that they're doing. There were a few things that I did want to call out. The report also does a great job of calling these elements out. So being paid equitably, comparable to other positions in your field, ranked really low. No surprise there. The other one that I think is kind of related to this is specifically there was dissatisfaction around career path, career development opportunities, professional development opportunities, and the willingness of management at nonprofit organizations to regularly discuss these with staff and facilitate these professional advancement opportunities from happening. So that was a very interesting one that I could see having a lot more discussion around. And then finally, one that I think is so striking to me, I think it goes really to the heart of just a lot of things that even in like progressive, really good-minded, even with progressive communities, there's still so many kind of social justice blind spots that this one is very interesting, very, very interesting. One of the lowest rated responses in the survey was whether they feel that their organization actively recruits and hires applicants with disabilities. So this could potentially go back to a transparency question, and that's something to, your leadership or HR would be able to address that if it's just that employees don't know what measures are going into place, or it could be an industry-wide problem where recruiting among people who have disabilities is not valued. So something else that I would love to do a whole video just on that question, but super interesting findings. So key takeaways, I think that the key uses for this survey are for pretty much three main constituencies. One of them being leaders of nonprofits who are planning compensation philosophies, who are putting together long-term strategies for staffing positions, wage and benefit packages, and facilitating those questions with your boards and your donors. This is really invaluable tool for helping those leaders have some data to look at so that you're informing your decisions based on data, not just on the problems that you're facing in that moment, in that day. Second, obviously, job seekers in the nonprofit industry. It can be super handy to be able to go in that drop down, look up the positions that you're applying for, and then just see where in the percentile the organizations you're applying for fall. Because I do think that one thing about the tool that's interesting is looking at the size of organization and how pay can really vary based on that. Of course, if you're at a smaller organization, oftentimes you get to have a little bit more opportunity for learning new skills and having more ownership over things, but the salaries can also come a bit lower. So it's good to be able to look at that as you're job hunting. The other thing it's really valuable for in terms of nonprofit job seekers is and they called this out in the video, the executive director of 501 Commons specifically talked about this, that long-term career planning is often really challenging for nonprofit employees, and it's affected our entire industry, so that we think of nonprofit work as something people do temporarily rather as something that you would build a career in doing, depending on the level, of course. However, if people are planning on putting their time and energy into building careers in the nonprofit space, and we want to retain that talent in the nonprofit sector, then this is a really cool and really incredible tool. And then finally, I think this is really useful for fundraisers and community leaders. You can use this tool to coordinate having these like bigger, more industry-wide conversations. So it really isn't just about one organization's need over the other. And so the tool is really cool in framing this as something that the industry can take on rather than just something that is everyone's individual responsibility to address. It can challenge traditional ways of funding our movements and a lot of the assumptions that we have. The report does a great job of calling out how the nonprofit sector was built upon the unpaid labor primarily of women, and that we still see the impact of that carried over into how the work is done and compensated for today. So if we want to fund our sector but be in alignment with our values, we need tools like this in order to facilitate those conversations. Y'all come on back now, you hear? So yeah, y'all come on back now, you hear?